Chapter 44. The Rescue Team Departs. Nick Fury had picked 3 people. One was Shou Feng from the world of Legend of Lu Xiaofeng, another was Ah Xing from the world of Kung Fu, and the third was Meng Bo from the Hong Kong version of City Hunter. Fury was pleased with his choices. Despite his habit of leaving things to chance, he'd lucked out this time. Each of the 3 brought something different to the table. Jiang Ju gathered them in a private room and laid out the terms. S-Shield is as top tier as it gets, he said. We can arrange almost anything, provided it isn't too exotic. For example, Lu Xiaofeng, in this world there are some rare meteoric ores that can be forged into remarkable weapons. Lu Xiaofeng shrugged. I don't use weapons. What use would a magical blade be to me? If you don't want it, give it to a comrade, Jiang Ju countered. Or, we could make you armor. Lu Xiaofeng smiled wryly. You're really pushing a sale on me, aren't you? You're treating cold weapons like priceless treasures, but in this world, firearms are the real treasure, Jiang Ju said with a shake of his head. Still, it's meant to be for your benefit. Ah Xing, who had been listening, spoke up. I don't need mystical swords. What I want are mid-20th century firearm design plans, production chain information, and technical manuals. If I can get the designs and the manufacturing know-how, that'll enable me to build and use them. Nick Fury nodded. Designs are one thing, production chains are another. We'll have to dig through our archives. Tony Stark likely has some of the parts, but tracking the full chain might take work. Jiang Ju looked impressed. You actually want to change how things work, not just take what's available. That's rare. Ah Xing smiled, but was modest. I only noticed some possibilities after coming here. Few in my world would think to pay attention. We'll help, Jiang Ju said. If you need anything, ask. Don't be shy. Meng Bo broke the growing seriousness with a leering grin. I don't need much, just better gear for agents. And maybe a few pretty agents to meet, he added, winking. The room's solemnity snapped as everyone laughed. All right, Jiang Ju said, slapping his palm on the table. A parchment contract shimmered into being, listing the agreements in formal script. Sign here. Despite their oddities, the 3 trusted Jiang Ju. When it came to business, he was precise, and that certainty was enough for them. They signed. The contract vanished in a flash, and Nick Fury rose. It was time to get to work. Fury didn't take them far. First things first, they needed orientation. He drove them to a secure SIL facility in Manhattan for crash training and a primer on this world's technology. Lu Xiaofeng, who had never seen modern vehicles before, looked pale and seasick on the ride. Are you all right? Fury asked. I'm fine, Lu Xiaofeng said, waving a hand. It's just my first time in something like this. I'll get used to it. There will be quick training and a few wardrobe adjustments, Fury said, eyeing the differences in their clothes. Lu Xiaofeng immediately tensed when he noticed Fury glancing at his hair. Don't touch my hair, he said, suspiciously. Don't worry, we won't, Fury said flatly, then turned to the others. Any cultural taboos I should know about? No, Ah Xing said. No. Meng Bo echoed him with a confident grin. They were all from worlds with modern sensibilities, so nothing else surprised them. Fury assigned trusted agents to run intensive briefings for each of them in separate rooms. They needed a rapid but thorough introduction to the basics of the 21st century world, how firearms worked, and operational protocols as S-Shield assets. Meng Bo adapted quickest. He already understood modern tech. Ah Xing and Lu Xiaofeng took a bit longer, but by the end of the day, they had a working grasp of firearms and the world's different conventions. That evening, S-Shield booked a flight to Afghanistan. On the plane, both Lu Xiaofeng and Ah Xing watched the view outside with a mixture of awe and apprehension. In their world, no amount of skill let you simply fly through the air. This world is powerful, Lu Xiaofeng said quietly to Agent Coulson, who was seated nearby. Martial arts can do much, but here there are other things even more formidable. Coulson smiled. This world has a lot to offer and a lot to protect. That's why we do what we do. For this mission, Fury had put Agent Coulson in charge on the ground. Fury himself stayed behind to oversee the operation from headquarters. As for Captain America, Coulson added, they think they might have found a way to bring him back. Lu Xiaofeng took that in with a thoughtful expression. Then he raised his cup and offered a toast, his tone warm. To you unknown heroes who guard this world, he said. Coulson returned the gesture with a smile. They were on their way. The rescue team's real work was about to begin. Chapter 45. Clues, Bros. A SA Shield plane touched down on the tarmac in a military zone in Afghanistan. Agent Phil Coulson stepped out in his black suit and sunglasses. Behind him came three figures in matching black trousers, windbreakers, and dark shades. Lu Xiaofeng, with his distinctive narrow brows, the young master Ah Xing, and the suave Meng Bo. Meng Bo, in particular, moved with a casual confidence that made him stand out. Before Coulson could speak to the base officers, Meng Bo produced an ID and handed it to the nearest soldier. The soldier glanced at the card, then moved forward, but another soldier blocked him. He's new, the officer sneered. A little excitable. Coulson met the officer's gaze. Can you help us find Tony Stark? He asked. The officer gave a contemptuous laugh. Besides, they're all. He let the word hang, aimed at their ethnicity. Lu Xiaofeng materialized next to him in an instant, smiling as if asking, What did you just say? Ah Xing's expression, meanwhile, hardened. There was a pressure about him that felt like a coiled spring. Everyone present, soldiers included, instinctively sensed that he was not someone to be trifled with. Watch your mouth, sir, Coulson warned coolly. The officer tried to stay put, but Ah Xing made two silent hand seals and pushed them toward the concrete wall behind the group. With a thunderous crack, a palm-sized imprint burned into the wall, an exact match for Ah Xing's hands. The sound echoed, and the soldiers swallowed audibly. In an instant, guns were raised toward Ah Xing. Lower your weapons, Coulson barked. He didn't want a firefight with the military on the runway. We're here to find Tony Stark, not to start a war. The officer straightened, trying to recover his authority. It's your people who stirred things up, he said, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. You just used racial insults, Coulson answered, voice harder now. If you keep this up, I'll need to report you to your superiors. The officer's bravado faltered. He waved his hand. All right, put the guns down. He motioned his men to lower their rifles. He knew that if this escalated into accusations of racism, it would be his career on the line. I've prepared what you'll need. It's not far. You can go look for yourselves. Ah Xing's jaw tightened at the casual discrimination. There's no place for that in the world, he muttered later, once they were out of earshot. But it's everywhere. Some people just hide it better. Meng Bo nodded. I know the feeling. People judge in my world too. The only answer is to get stronger, strong enough that no one can push you around, strong enough to protect people across borders. Maybe that won't erase prejudice, but it'll let us say no to it. Ah Xing's smile was small but sincere. I'll help make that happen, even if it's only in my world. Lu Xiaofeng stood by with a faint smile. I believe in you, because of Boss Jiangju's support, and because of who you are. Coulson had wrapped up the official formalities by then. He looked at the three with an apologetic frown. Despite their help so far, they weren't official S.H.I.E.L.D. assets, and he was constrained by protocol. Sorry, he said wryly. There are always some self-righteous idiots. He spread the folder of evidence on the hood of a nearby vehicle. We've prepared all the photos and incident reports from the attack. Lu Xiaofeng examined the documents. Tony didn't just pick a route at random, did he? He could read the English reports, an advantage afforded by the little tavern charm he carried. The convoys took different routes, but the terrorists still had exact information. Coulson nodded. At first, we thought someone on the inside had tipped them off, but the evidence points to something stranger. Tony seemed to choose his vehicle at random. So you don't think the army was bribed? Meng Bo asked. Have you checked everyone on the escort and people close to them? We checked everything, Coulson said. That's why we called you. We wanted the tavern's help. Meng Bo's face darkened. If this were simple, you wouldn't need us. The terrorists had precise intel, Lu Xiaofeng said. That strongly suggests a mole. But we're not here primarily to root out a traitor. We're here to find Tony. If we go to the ambush site, we might still find something. It's been almost a month, Coulson said. Do you really think we'll find anything now? We've already scoured the area. We'll need methods you can't normally use, Lu Xiaofeng replied with a shrug. If your people could reach out to contacts in the magical realms, we could trace him. It's harder because Tony doesn't come to the tavern much, too busy. and so few in that world would know him. I'm curious about the tavern myself, Coulson admitted, but I don't seem to be able to get in. There'll be a day, Lu Xiaofeng said lightly, then turned to Mengbo. Let's go. We should track down your legendary playboy. Mengbo grinned. Fine, I'll drive. He added with a mock pout. Playboy, huh? Why do you keep looking at me when you say that? Ah Xing and Lu Xiaofeng laughed together. Coulson nodded and was about to follow when Lu Xiaofeng paused and looked at him. You should stay here, she said. Handle the official side. If we locate Tony or run into the terrorists' lair, we'll need your support. Coulson agreed. It made sense. If the trail led back to a military operation or required S-Shield authority, they'd need him in place. With a final exchange of looks, the three climbed into a waiting vehicle and drove off toward the site of the attack, leaving Coulson to coordinate the follow-up and wait for whatever clues they could uncover. Chapter 46, Bird Letter. Lu Xiaofeng and three others had gone off to rescue Tony, leaving Jiangju's tavern open as usual. A few patrons had asked to watch the operation, but when they arrived, they found that everyone was still training. Some of the onlookers watched with relish, others sipped their drinks as if nothing unusual was happening. Do you think Tony can build an iron suit? Xiaohe asked curiously. How would I know? Jiangju shrugged. But the last time I saw his work, he'd already made a tiny arc reactor prototype. It should be possible. It's a pity Dr. Wu isn't a physicist like Ethan. There's only so much I can do to help. So you accepted S-Shield's request? Xiaohe pressed. Jiangju shrugged again. I didn't agree because of politics. It's a straightforward transaction. If someone pays me, why should I say no? They chatted for a while, then Jiangju returned to his corner with a book. The tavern door creaked open, and a young man stepped in, a black and gray jumpsuit with an English name printed on the back. He hesitated at the threshold, as if he might have come to the wrong place. His hand hovered over the energy pistol on his hip. Welcome to the tavern. I'm the owner, Jiangju, the proprietor called, standing to greet him with a smile. Where is this place? The newcomer asked, uncertain. Relax. Team Asuka Shin, this is not a dangerous place, Jiangju said calmly. Asuka Shin looked around. Near the door sat a Tauren, a green-skinned orc, and even a blue-skinned, tall Navi-like figure. The assortment of faces from different worlds made him step back a little. He cast a dubious look at Jiangju. You see those people? Jiangju said casually. They're from other worlds. You're not in your original world either. Asuka tightened his grip on the glowing sword at his side, ready to transform if necessary. Who are you? He demanded. Why do I always have to explain things before people will believe them? Jiangju laughed and reached out. In an instant, the glowing sword was in his hand. Everyone watched, stunned, as the blade shrank and shifted into a tiny model of Ultraman Dyna, pulsing with light. How is that possible? Asuka blinked. He'd never imagined anyone else could become Dyna, or that anyone could take his weapon like that and alter it. Jiangju returned the miniature to the sword's true form and handed it back. How about a drink and a little patience, he said. You may not accept all this right away. There's wine here. Get to know the place. Asuka took the sword mechanically, then allowed Jiangju to lead him to a table. His confused expression drew soft laughter and curious glances from the other patrons, most of whom had seen far stranger things than a nervous young man with a transformation device. Maybe he's a world's guardian, the green-skinned orc murmured. I can sense a pure light about that thing in his hand, a kind of energy that makes us wary and uneasy. It could be because of the evil power inside you, the Tauren said dryly. It's like the holy light, but it's not the same. Damn Gul'dan, the orc spat, banging the table. The Tauren shrugged and went back to drinking. Slowly, Asuka began to take in his surroundings and the explanation behind them. The idea of a tavern that served as a crossroads for people from different worlds was hard to accept. Anyone suddenly thrust into that chaos would be confused. He looked at Jiangju and asked, why does this tavern exist? People drink, they talk, they take jobs from time to time. It's a sanctuary, somewhere to rest, somewhere to keep a little peace, Jiangju said with a knowing smile. For some, it's also a place that changes destinies. Changes destinies? Asuka frowned. How could a place like this know anyone's destiny? Look around, Jiangju answered. I don't like grandiose words like, I'm not human, but I do know the fates of many who pass through here, and I help guide them. Then do you know why I became Ultraman Dyna? Asuka asked suddenly. Because there was light in your heart. You believed in miracles, and you wanted to save the people at your base. The light of miracles in the universe responded to your heart, Jiangju said gently. That's usually how it goes. Light in my heart? Asuka managed a wry smile. It sounded absurd, but hearing someone say it with such certainty made him uneasy and, in a strange way, a little comforted. Young people get confused when power appears out of nowhere. Jiangju continued, Don't lose faith in yourself. I believe you'll become a real hero. The words warmed Asuka more than he expected. He hesitated when the tavern hand set a glass in front of him. He was on duty and technically supposed to stay sober. This wine digests quickly. Didn't you see everyone's eyes light up a moment ago? Jiangju said, reading him. This one's special. I made it for you. It'll help you fuse with the miracle light inside you. One day soon, you won't need the sword to change. You'll transform by your own will. Transform by will? Asuka's interest was immediate. Yes, the light exists in the hearts of many people, Jiangju explained. It's a question of compatibility. Those who hold justice and hope in their hearts sometimes become light and take on a form to protect others. He smiled. For many, the day they turned into light is their most precious memory. The children turned into light? Asuka asked, puzzled. Some histories are forgotten over time, but some people never forget, Jiangju said. If you want answers, look for the Victory Team. Their captain, Megumi, was the original Ultraman Tiga. If you can, visit the Mars base. There are truths waiting there. Asuka repeated, Captain Megumi, the Mars base? Yes, that's where you'll find part of what you're looking for, Jiangju said. He lifted his own glass. But for now, drink. Keep protecting the Earth, Ultraman Dyna. Chapter 47, New Business. Fei Niaoxin left after a glass of wine and a dose of Jiangju's well-meaning comfort. Reassured, he strode out of the tavern with his shoulders a little higher. Once the door closed behind him, Jiangju grinned and held up the card in his hand. It was the size of a bank card, with Ultraman Dyna's image printed on it. Yes, Ultra Power, activate! Jiangju struck a ridiculous theatrical pose. Ultraman-san, Tiga-san, lend me the light! For a moment, everyone in the room assumed their boss was having another of his Chunibyo episodes. Then, Jiangju changed the mood completely. In an instant, his features rearranged as if he'd been recast. Purple, red, black, and silver tones painted his posture, and a palm-sized ring on his chest began to glow blue. The glow flared, and in the next breath, he snapped back to normal, all smiles, and slid the cards onto the shelf beside the tavern's old television. What did you just do? Someone asked. Jiangju tapped the card with pride. I analyzed the light signature from Ultraman Dyna, then used that data to recreate the ability card. That's how I made them. One card for each ability. If you slide a card through my reader, you can borrow that ability for a limited time. He produced the reader, a wrist-wearable device with a square display and a slim card slot. You slip the card along the slot, the reader decoded it instantly, and the screen showed the ability and its details. Each card has an explanation on the back and a price, Jiangju continued. You can buy any card you want, after you buy the reader, of course. Ms. Dragonborn, who'd been drinking with a few companions, stepped closer. So these are actual abilities? She asked, curious. Exactly, Jiangju said, rubbing his hands together. For a short time, you can use whatever's on the card. Think of it as a rental. A girl who'd come in with lust, her eyes still shining, brightened. So we can buy them? Yep. Jiangju pointed toward the shelf. Everything's labeled. You purchase the reader, then the cards. The card itself vanishes when its time's up. And don't worry, the reader will warn you before a card expires, and abilities won't trigger automatically mid-battle. Rust leaned forward, eyeing the stacked cards. Why do these look so much like the powers of the people you sealed? He asked suspiciously. They are those abilities, Jiangju said casually. If you want, I can duplicate your ability into a card. We can split it, 370, 730, whatever arrangement you want. He smiled like a businessman offering a deal. Rust frowned. That won't make me lose my original ability, will it? Of course not, Jiangju said lightly. Except for those I punished, or those who willingly handed their powers over. Those are different cases. Conan, who had been watching the whole scene with narrowed eyes, suddenly piped up. So that's what you've been doing. Makes sense. Everyone turned. Jiangju scowled. Conan's timing was infuriating. Don't bother the grown-ups. Go play with Xiaolan, Rust muttered, giving Conan a playful whack on the head. Conan clutched his skull. Hey, he whined, pouting at Lust. She did not look one bit maternal, more like she was enjoying his discomfort. Jiangju grabbed Conan's collar and hoisted him up. You, quiet, he said. If you keep yapping, I'll... He lowered his voice to a mock menace. I'll turn you into a child and tell everyone embarrassing stories about your girlfriend giving you a bath. Conan's face went bright red. You already did, he blurted, mortified, because at that exact moment everyone in the tavern was staring at him with amused grins. Oops, Jiangju said, feigning innocence. I forgot I'd used voice transmission earlier. He put Conan down before the boy could melt into the floor. Conan, still flustered, tried to make himself small. Let me go home, he mumbled. Not until you apologize properly, Jiangju said, wagging a finger. Conan sighed dramatically and muttered, Okay, I'm sorry. Too perfunctory, Jiangju said, pretending to be stern. Who knows if you're cursing me in your heart? Conan opened his mouth as if to protest, then closed it. He knew when he'd been beaten. Finally, Jiangju patted his head. Good boy. With that, the brief, strange suspension of time, no one in the room had noticed it happen, shuffled itself away and resumed normal flow. While the little drama had been unfolding, the others in the tavern had been leafing through the pamphlets and cards on the opposite shelf. For those already on a path of cultivation or practice, the idea of learning entirely new techniques was daunting or impossible. But these cards offered them a chance to experience abilities they could never otherwise reach. That possibility made both seasoned fighters and ordinary patrons buzz with excitement. After all, who wouldn't want a taste of power, even for a short while? A newcomer, one of the women who'd been talking to Rust earlier, had been silently devouring the cards. She tugged at Jiangju's sleeve and stepped forward. Her hair was a surprising emerald, tied into twin tails, and she wore a sailor-style uniform. She'd only recently come to the tavern and had been pulled into conversation by La Stella. This was her first time meeting Jiangju. Boss, she said, eyes sparkling, I want a card reader, and I'll take sword control and lightning control. Jiangju gave her a knowing smile. Linali, right? From the demon world? She blinked. He'd recognized her at a glance. No problem, he continued, and Rust's friends enjoy a 20% discount. Chapter 48 Encounter. Jiangju had just rolled out a new gadget in the tavern, and once the regulars heard about it, almost everyone bought one. After all, it was a secondary ability that cost money but had no side effects. That made it an easy sell. A few knights, warriors, and mages, ordinary people in their own right, glanced at the price and silently resolved to work harder to afford the cards and readers. The shopping frenzy in that New York tavern, however, had nothing to do with the three people searching for Tony Stark in the Gobi Desert. They had been scouring the dunes for nearly a day. A month of sand and wind had already erased most obvious traces. Only a few subtle signs remained, signs that ordinary eyes would miss, but that Lu Xiaofeng and Xing could see. Mengbo, trailing behind them, felt like nothing more than the driver at this point. Let me go. Are your eyes microscopes? He muttered, bewildered. It's not exactly a microscope, Lu Xiaofeng said with a smile. There are martial arts that sharpen the senses. I happen to know a few. Mengbo huffed. You can do everything. You weren't entirely wrong, Xing said. I learned some of it from Brother Lu. He smiled, then added, Our world isn't without its own peerless arts. There are even beings like land gods. I saw one as a child, and I met him again years later. There are basic secrets, rumors I've heard in taverns. Maybe Brother Lu's world and mine are connected. Okay, you two are basically supernatural, Mengbo said and shifted the car toward the foothills at Lu's instruction. The landscape grew rockier, the sun hammered down. Lu wiped his sweating hands and regretted his wardrobe choice. If Mengbo had any sense of taste, he lamented inwardly. He wouldn't have picked black pants, a white shirt, and a black windbreaker for the Gobi. Lu made a sharp hand signal. Stop. Mengbo killed the engine. What's up? Xing's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Someone's watching us. How close? Mengbo asked, suddenly alert. 2 o'clock, 2 people. One has eyes on us, and at 3 o'clock there are several more. I can feel them watching. Xing's brief time with S.H.I.E.L.D. had taught him precise observation and terminology. Of the three, he had studied the hardest, memorizing manuals and shorthand on the long ride to Afghanistan. A few 100 meters down the slope, 5 or 6 figures lay prone in the scrub. They wore earth-brown camo without insignia and carried the sort of rifles and submachine guns commonly seen in Afghanistan. Apart from their skin tones, they'd hidden anything that might give away their nationality. From above, one young soldier with thick brows and wide eyes whispered to a compact, capable-faced man who clearly led the team. "Captain, the 3 below spotted us." The captain adjusted his telescope and studied the trio by the car. "They look like soldiers, Chinese," he said quietly. "What do we do?" a subordinate asked. Before the captain could make a call, someone from the slope below waved dismissively at them, an arrogant gesture that annoyed the captain. He ordered the comms specialist to verify identities. "Dr. Wu was attacked in a village nearby," one of the men said under his breath. "All leads were cut off around here. These people turning up now can't be a coincidence. Either they're involved, or they're also looking for whoever we are," the captain murmured. "Tony Stark," someone behind them said calmly. The words barely left the speaker's mouth when the men stiffened. Lu Xiaofeng had moved like a shadow. While Meng Bo created a distraction, Lu had used Qinggong to close the distance in an instant and tapped several acupuncture points. One by one, the soldiers went rigid, frozen where they lay. "Acupuncture? Who are you?" the captain demanded. He could still speak because Lu hadn't targeted the point that would silence him. He could only watch as his team lay motionless. Lu folded his arms and looked up at them. "Lu Xiaofeng, may I ask who you are?" The captain frowned. "Lu Xiaofeng? I've never heard of him." "You said you're looking for Tony Stark," Lu continued. "The famous weapons dealer?" "Yes, that's him." The captain was suspicious but restrained. "You don't look like gangsters. You have the bearing of soldiers." Lu smiled lightly. "Then perhaps we should be examining each other's business." Xing had been watching the men below with interest. "They're soldiers," he observed, "and not from a weak country. You can read that from the way they carry themselves. This nation, wherever they're from, looks like a rising power." The captain said nothing. It was difficult to tell friend from foe in a world where appearances could be disguised. Still, he had orders and a mission to find who had attacked Dr. Wu, and these strangers had appeared where the trail had gone cold. At that moment, Meng Bo, out of breath and a little pale from the climb, arrived at the car's rear. "I said you were moving too fast," he wheezed. "I could barely keep up." He pressed a hand to his chest and grimaced at his own choice of clothing. "If I hadn't downed as many drinks in the tavern as I did to keep up my stamina, I'd be on the ground." Lu didn't laugh. The situation demanded more than jokes. They were all looking for the same man, Tony Stark, and the desert had suddenly become a crossroads of shadowed intentions. Chapter 49th, God's Spear Bureau. The 3 of them had run into soldiers who appeared to be from the Eastern superpower. To avoid unnecessary trouble, Lu Xiaofeng had quietly struck their pressure points and then engaged them in a friendly conversation. "So these are the ones who just targeted us?" Meng Bo, who had come up from behind, squinted at the squad and produced a small device. "Let me scan them and see who they are." He aimed the instrument at a few of the men, and a moment later, the display filled with data. This group belonged to a mobile unit known as the Divine Spear Bureau. The device couldn't pull up information on everyone, but the leader's profile loaded clearly. "Captain Chu Xuan," Meng Bo read aloud, inventing the name on the spot as a tip of the hat to a senior colonel. He nodded toward the man at the front. The microcomputer in Chu Xuan's correspondent had already received the same 3 profiles. Data Lu Xiaofeng had told S.H.I.E.L.D. to register before coming here as a precaution. If Chu Xuan had access to that fabricated registration, it suggested S.H.I.E.L.D.'s files had been penetrated. "Then we should unlock our pressure points," Chu Xuan said after a moment of silence. "Also, although your information has been transmitted, we haven't seen it yet. That doesn't count as knowing one another." "My fault." Lu Xiaofeng chuckled and flicked his divine spear. Immediately, the three regained use of their limbs. Chuchuan flexed his hands and feet, glanced at his datapad, and asked, "Are you from S.H.I.E.L.D.? "Only in a temporary cooperative sense," Ah Xing answered, shaking his head. "Who knows if that's true?" another soldier muttered, rubbing a sore calf. Being put out of commission by pressure point strikes didn't feel good. "If we aren't enemies, even a temporary truce will do," Lu Xiaofeng said, unconcerned by the small diplomatic wrinkle. He looked at Chuchuan. "We haven't stated our objective yet. How do you know we're here to rescue someone?" Chuchuan studied the handsome stranger in front of him. There was something knightly about the man, but the man was clearly not from their country. "The Dr. Wu you're after? Our intel indicates he is with Tony Stark right now," Lu Xiaofeng said with a small smile. "From what I know of you, you wouldn't allow top domestic talent like Dr. Wu to be harmed." "You have good intelligence, worthy of S.H.I.E.L.D., Chuchuan replied coolly. My team only registered our files 2 days ago. You were able to access them so quickly. That's not ordinary." He was unsettled. He hadn't expected his counterpart to display such quick insight. If Lu Xiaofeng could disturb others with just a few words and manipulate moods, any attempt at intimidation would probably fail. "You're lucky we're not with S.H.I.E.L.D., Meng Bo said bluntly, then added, "Enough talk about that. Let's save people. It's been a month. If we delay, a terrorist could slip up and everyone pays the price." Chuchuan nodded. Whether these three were lying or not, the task at hand was clear. Save the hostages. Matters of intelligence and jurisdiction could be handled later by the general administration. So the two units agreed to a temporary cooperation and set out together. With Lu Xiaofeng and Ah Xing on the lead, the search went more smoothly. Night was falling by the time they reached a suspicious village not far away. "Why did we stop?" one Divine Spear soldier asked. His instruments detected nothing intentional in the area. There are at least 7 or 8 figures at the village entrance. Almost all of them exude a strong, murderous aura. "Something's wrong with this place," Ah Xing said in a low voice. "Murderous aura? Come on, just because you can do kung fu doesn't mean that sort of thing exists," the soldier scoffed. "Just because you can't sense it doesn't mean it isn't there," Chuchuan said sharply, cutting him off. He had some knowledge of the more unusual aspects of the Divine Spear Bureau. Certain phenomena were not easily explained by modern sensors. "What do we do now?" Meng Bo asked. "We go in quietly and locate this group's base," Lu Xiaofeng answered. He turned to Chuchuan. "There is one problem. Ah Xing and I don't understand the language here. Even if we capture someone alive, we won't be able to extract useful information. Our team has a bright young man who speaks more than a dozen languages," Chuchuan said, a note of pride in his voice. "Good, then Ah Xing and I will take this little clever with us. You wait here for our report." Lu Xiaofeng nodded. In a few effortless bounds, he, Ah Xing, and the translator known as Little Clever slipped out of sight. "Looks like I need to revise my worldview when I get back," one of the soldiers muttered as they watched the three disappear into the dusk. Chuchuan said nothing. He was already planning how to probe Meng Bo for more about these men. The abilities the trio had shown were unnerving. Unfortunately for him, Meng Bo was as slippery as they came. When Chuchuan tried to question him, Meng Bo steered the conversation elsewhere, recounting tangential tales of his amorous past and leaving no opening for interrogation. Chuchuan regretted choosing the wrong man to question. If he'd picked Ah Xing, he might have learned a great deal. Lu Xiaofeng was an ancient soul who knew little of modern China, while Ah Xing, raised in the modern era, had a fiercer patriotic fire and a more immediate stake in the world they were trying to save. "Hey, Captain Chuchuan, they've just sent a signal. We should move." Meng Bo's device began to vibrate. He opened it and flashed a smile at Chuchuan. "Right, let's go." Chuchuan exhaled. On the battlefield, he might be Chuchuan the equal, he thought, but in the realm of intelligence and improvisation, he had clearly underestimated this brazen, secretive, big-nosed stranger. Chapter 50. Tony's Struggle for Freedom. The cave smelled of diesel and metal filings. Deep in the Afghan mountains, Tony Stark and Dr. Ho Yinsen, called Dr. Wu by the guards, were doing manual labor under the watchful eyes of gunmen. The tools were crude, the workspace primitive, and the terrorists were relentless. They'd made it clear Tony would build whatever they demanded. They called it a Rico missile system. From the way they talked and handled things, it was obvious they were not engineers. They were dangerous, illiterate men with guns and very little understanding of what they were asking for. A man who had overseen earlier work had come through the cave several times. He'd noticed differences between the jerky sketches Tony could produce and the so-called Jericho system they claimed to want, but Tony had let himself be profiled and kept the real design in his head. As the work progressed, though, both Tony and Dr. Yinsen became more careful. If their true intentions were discovered, if the terrorists realized Tony wasn't building what they thought, they could lash out violently. "Sometimes I don't know what to do," Dr. Yinsen said quietly as they passed a screwdriver between them. "Hesitate? About what? Confessing your love?" Tony said with a half smile, trying to lighten the mood. It was his way of keeping panic at bay. Dr. Yinsen's face didn't change. "I'm hesitating whether to kill you." For a beat, Tony thought it a bad joke. Then he saw the gravity in the doctor's eyes. This was not idle talk. "You're serious?" Tony's voice tightened. "Why would you kill me? Because I didn't return your confession." Dr. Yinsen laughed once, hollowly. "Your talent is frightening. Even in a cave, you can make something that becomes a weapon. If you ever leave, what will you do? I can't sleep thinking about it." It hit Tony then. Of course, that was the fear at the back of his mind. The man who had given them both a second chance was worried Tony's genius would be used to kill. Not because Tony wanted to sell weapons, but because he intended to build armor for himself. A Mark series in his head, a suit to protect him, and Yinsen feared how others would exploit it. "Do you think I'll keep making weapons after what I've seen?" Tony asked softly. He knew what Yinsen feared, and he needed to reassure him. Dr. Yinsen sighed. "I don't know if I can trust you, but there is something I can do right now." He stood, walked over, and pointed to the stack of papers Tony had sketched on. "We should burn these." Tony stared at the blueprints, his designs, his work. "They're just scraps. It's all in my head anyway. But if you finish this suit here, we'll never get the papers out. They'd find them and use them." Yinsen's voice was steady. "Burn them." Tony numbly handed the papers over. He had already memorized every detail, stored it mentally in the only place that mattered, his head. Still, he needed Dr. Yinsen to trust him. "I'll need your help," Tony said. "Make some new blueprints, enough to satisfy them without giving anything away." Yinsen took the remaining sheets, moved into the blind spot of a crude camera the guards sometimes used, and set a few of them alight. He left behind paper that looked convincing at a glance, but was a deliberate mix of half-truths and nonsense. "Don't worry," Tony said, a grin sneaking back onto his face. "I can draw some diagrams that'll keep them busy and confused. They'll think they're looking at the right thing and tinker themselves into frustration." Yinsen nodded, not entirely trusting the bravado, but relieved enough for the moment. "How much longer until the suit is finished?" "Almost there," Tony said after considering. "We only need to assemble and install the auxiliary systems. The armor itself is strong, but without coordination it's useless. I could break a limb the first time I try to walk in it. If the actuators and the servos don't sync with my movements, the shell will move and I won't. You get what I mean. The suit could turn and my body wouldn't, like some junk suit from a certain hammer company." "I think I can buy us time," Yinsen said through gritted teeth. "Maybe Leah can help delay them." Tony joked at first, but Yinsen's face went hard. "Tony, please show her some respect. She's saved both our lives." Leah, the Red Cross volunteer who had been assigned as a translator, had stuck with them despite the danger. She was the one who'd smoothed over questions and turned suspicion away with quick thinking. Tony knew, even if he rarely admitted it, how brave she'd been. "You're right," he said. "I'm sorry." The apology was rare for him and genuine. Leah had repeatedly risked herself to help them. Tony's instinct to dodge heavy topics had been nothing but cowardice. That evening brought a different routine inspection. The guard in charge this time wasn't the usual man. It was the bald one who'd appeared before, the one with the jade ring on his thumb. He was impatient and harsher than the others. He shoved Dr. Yinsen to the floor and called Leah forward. Without warning, he punched and kicked her while barking orders. Tony could only watch, flailing for some way to intervene that didn't get everyone killed. He tried words, then feeble physical resistance. They weren't enough. The bald man leaned toward Tony and in a rough, unexpected English said, "Bows and arrows and cavalry. Genghis Khan used those to conquer lands. Times change, but the principles remain." Tony was taken aback that the man had enough English to make that point. Worse, it suggested the leader could read and might be capable of understanding more than they hoped, even the remaining papers. "You have 1 day, Tony Stark," the bald man said coldly, then in Pashto or Farsi ordered them to be quiet. "If I don't see a missile in 24 hours, I will kill you." Tony's face went panicked for those watching, but internally he exhaled. The threat, brutal as it was, came from ignorance. Someone who could mouth English but didn't truly understand the complexity of what they demanded. A single man couldn't assemble an advanced weapon in a day with the supplies available in this cave. "I can't do this alone," Tony said aloud, pointing to Yinsen and Leah. "I need their help. They may not be professional, but we've been working together. We know the plan." "You have 1 night," the bald man repeated, then waved the guards to take Dr. Yinsen and Leah away. His final glance was a warning he didn't need to make louder. He turned and left the cave. When the door clanged shut, the cave felt smaller than before. Tony looked at Yinsen and Leah, two people who had risked everything for a sliver of hope. He couldn't promise the world, but he could promise this. He would find a way out. Chapter 51. Rescue Tony helped Dr. Wu and Leah to their feet. If she had lied earlier about not knowing Tony Stark, he might already be dead. That thought made him trust her now in a way he hadn't before. "Thank you," Tony said. He rarely spoke like that. When he did, it was usually casual. This time, it came from the heart. "I'm not doing it for you." Leah shrugged free of his arm. "What you brought here brought death and pain. I help because I want to live. I have to survive." Tony opened his mouth, then closed it. He could have argued before, but after seeing that the weapons he'd been forced to sell were already in the hands of men like these terrorists, he no longer had any confident rebuttal. "There are some things words can't fix," Dr. Wu said, patting Tony on the shoulder. "We need to move faster. We need your help right now, Leah." "I'm not good at precision work," Leah said. "If you needed someone to hold off the control room guards, I could do that." To survive and to preserve whatever ideals still mattered to her, Leah had risked everything. It was a hard, reckless choice for an Afghan woman, but she had made it. "It's mostly manual work, no sacrifices," Tony said, then glanced meaningfully at the two of them. He'd been reluctant to let Leah go into danger at first. Now he refused to hand her life to chance. He set to work scavenging parts and improvising, makeshift triggers, jury-rigged actuators, and a few improvised weapons to integrate with the suit. "You're not leaving your life to my mercy," Leah snapped. But then she added, "When you need the monitoring room distracted, I'll go and stall them. I just hope your plan works." "I have a plan," Tony insisted, almost helplessly. "I don't want you to do this. Don't worry about me. After you get out of here, this will be a small chapter of your life," Leah said. She moved to Dr. Wu's side and ignored Tony. "Tony, get to work. If your plan succeeds, we move on. If it fails, it won't matter what any of us wanted." Dr. Wu didn't want to see Leah throw herself away, but he agreed. If Tony's plan failed, none of them would leave this place alive. So Tony went silent and began feeding data into the computers while directing the two of them to perform the physical tasks. The three of them worked in tandem, assembling and adapting the pieces of a mark armor, improvised but functional, bit by bit. 4 hours later, Tony had finished building and debugging the components. They were ready for a wear test, though test was more euphemism than reality. They laid out the assisting instruments Tony had fabricated in a corner of the room hidden from the camera's sight. Meanwhile, Lu Xiaofeng and the others had finished dealing with the terrorists in the nearby village. They stood awkwardly among the captured families, uncomfortable with what to do next. It would be cruel to execute them, but when compared to the victims of the terrorists' crimes, leaving them free felt impossible. "What should we do?" Lu Xiaofeng asked Chu Xuan. He wasn't from this world and didn't share the same kind of hatred for these criminals. Killing unarmed people was not something he could do lightly. And their deployment here was covert. If they were discovered, their superiors would deny any involvement. "How long can the acupuncture hold?" Chu Xuan asked. They were soldiers, not executioners. Still, they had to make a plan. With Xing and me working, we should be able to keep them unconscious for 7, maybe 8 hours, Lu Xiaofeng said. These men don't have internal strength training. Their bodies won't hold up longer. Then that's what we do. Pin them down with acupuncture for the time being. Let the local authorities handle the rest. Chushuan considered it and nodded. They could reach and rescue Tony and Dr. Wu within 7 or 8 hours. Lu Xiaofeng and Xing moved efficiently. They rendered the captives unconscious and, using intelligence gathered from earlier interrogations, headed toward the mountainous compound less than 30 kilometers away, where Tony and Dr. Meng Wu were being held. Lu asked Xing to go with the rest of the team while he used Qinggong, lightness skill, to move ahead alone. He'd left the tavern knowing Tony was building some strange weapon. He admired the man's ability to think on his feet instead of crumbling. Approaching the compound, Lu spotted terrorists on patrol. The valley was full of caves and crude defenses. He didn't know which cave held Tony. During Jiangju's broadcast, there had been no precise details. I should have brought Little Clever, Lu thought, then selected a well-dressed guard from a patrol and slipped after him, moving around to intercept him in a shadowed corner. "Stop!" the guard began to protest, but Lu tapped his acupoints and the man froze. "Answer me," Lu said in English. "Where is Tony Stark?" The guard struggled but didn't seem to understand. Lu frowned. He'd assumed the tavern's magic would make language a non-issue. When Lu asked Jiangju about this, he'd been told that guests in the tavern could usually understand each other. Races and tongues were no barrier there. That's why when Gandalf and others were in the tavern, there had been no language problem. But here, without the tavern's influence, the man's words were useless. Lu's patience thinned. With a dark expression, he formed a piece of ice in the air, then channeled it through his palm, invoking the life and death talisman he had once learned from an emperor. It was a crude secret technique, a middle to low-level martial arts trick, but it worked. The talisman gave him a measure of control over the man's body. Using the same method on a few others in the patrol, Lu finally confirmed Tony's location. Then an explosion rocked the cavern. Someone had already acted. Lu ran like a ghost through the darkness, dispatching any terrorist who crossed his path. He reached the cave that had been blown open and heard 2 steady heartbeats inside. With an intuitive sense and expert reflexes, he called out, "Tony Stark, I'm a guest of the tavern. You should remember this place." Tony, inside the shadows of the blown room, had been preparing to take down the remaining terrorists. He froze at the voice, an echo of the impossible tavern, and was unable to believe that a rescuer connected to that place could actually be here. He stepped into the dim light and looked at the newcomer, bewildered. "How did you find me?" Tony asked, lifting the visor of his improvised suit to get a better look. "The man calling himself Director of S-Heald came to the tavern and put this mission out," Lu Xiaofeng said. "It's safe now. Let your friends come out." Dr. Wu and Leah emerged, blinking in the cavern light. Dr. Wu looked from Tony to Lu, puzzled. "What's going on?" he asked. Tony shrugged, still processing everything. "The person who rescued me is here. I'm not sure how S-Shield fits in." "Dr. Wu?" Lu smiled briefly at the older man. "It seems people from your country have also sent help. They should be nearby. This isn't a place to talk. Follow me and get out of here." They had to move quickly. The fight wasn't over yet, but for the moment, the rescue had worked. Chapter 52, The Return of Iron Man. When Lu Xiaofeng and Tony Stark, still clad in his steel armor, emerged from the cave, the fighting outside had already ceased. Chushuan had shown an unexpected talent for command and combat during the skirmish, which surprised Mengbo. At first, Mengbo had thought little of them. After all, Lu Xiaofeng had captured most of the attackers single-handedly, but Chushuan and his team had proved they were no pushovers. It was just that Lu Xiaofeng's lethal skill made even well-trained soldiers look weak. Mengbo wondered what might have happened if those enemies had been sorcerers or cultivators. Not all the terrorists had been rounded up, but none remained in the valley to put up a fight. The others had fled when things turned bad, and Chushuan's squad had not pursued for the sake of completing their mission. "Dr. Wu, we've come to get you out of here," Chushuan said, resisting his curiosity about the metal suit and going straight to Dr. Wu. Dr. Wu's relief was obvious. Seeing compatriots had finally allowed the constant tightness in his chest to loosen. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I didn't really expect anyone would come," Tony admitted with a lopsided grin. "I thought it might have just been talk." If he hadn't been Tony Stark, he suspected no government would have shown much interest in rescuing him. Dr. Wu's reply was steady and proud. "Our country doesn't abandon its people." "Okay, but how do we get out of here now?" Tony asked, shrugging. The armor limited his movements. Its auxiliary system couldn't compare to Jarvis back home, and he felt awkward and cumbersome. Chushuan turned to Lu Xiaofeng. They had all survived this time, largely because of Lu Xiaofeng's help, so his opinion mattered. Lu considered the situation and shook his head. "We should split up. You, the Divine Spear Bureau, and S.H.I.E.L.D. probably don't want to be hanging around the same place right now. Better to separate." Chushuan agreed. "Right. Dr. Wu, we'll take you away first." "I want Leah to come with me," Dr. Wu said. "She helped keep me alive." "I only need to go back to Jian Town," Leah said quietly. "Leah?" Dr. Wu frowned. "You could come with me back to the country as my assistant. You'd have a fresh start there." "You could go with me," Tony added from the side. "You saved me. Let me return the favor." Leah's expression didn't change. "I appreciate it, but I have things to finish here." Her refusal was firm. Dr. Wu and Tony tried to persuade her, but Leah had clearly given up things for this cause before, and nothing they said could change her mind. In the end, they stopped pushing and simply told her she could ask them for help whenever she needed it. "This isn't pity or reward," Tony said earnestly. "Just my offer." Leah glanced at him, and for the first time, Tony's words seemed to reach her. There was no sarcasm in his voice now, only sincerity. "All right, I believe you. Take care of yourself," she replied, the sentiment sounding more like a blessing than anything else. They parted ways. Half an hour after Chushuan took Dr. Wu away, Lu Xiaofeng had Meng Bo send a signal. A shield Quinjet arrived above the valley and touched down. Agent Coulson stepped out smiling until he saw the armor Tony wore. The smile froze. Even if Coulson hadn't seen the suit before, Tony had warned him it might be problematic. Seeing the armor in person confirmed it was a complication. "This is Agent Coulson from S.H.I.E.L.D., Lu Xiaofeng said to Tony with a small smile. "He looks a little bewildered by your armor." "You've given us another problem, Mr. Stark," Thayer observed with a wry smile. Tony's reaction to Coulson was different from everyone else's. He seemed to slip back into his old persona, confident, a little flippant, but also brusquely private. "Do we know each other?" he asked. "Mr. Stark, we mean no harm," Coulson began to explain, but Tony cut him off. "I'm grateful for the rescue," Tony said evenly, "but I don't need you to rescue me." He extended the armored gauntlet, opened a glowing doorway in the air, and stepped through. Coulson's remaining composure collapsed at that. He stared at the empty spot where Tony had been, then looked at Lu Xiaofeng and the others as if asking silent questions. The only plausible explanation, he thought, was the mysterious tavern. Tony must have an entry pass. "It looks like someone's got access to that tavern," Lu Xiaofeng admitted. He didn't understand all that side of things, but it made him wonder whether their mission had truly been completed. "Maybe you should go back to the tavern and ask for more information," Coulson said, helpless. Since the tavern had appeared, much in the world had become inexplicable. "Here, take my contact. If we can get anything useful, we'll share it." Meng Bo, sweating from the day's exertions, couldn't resist one last practical note. "And don't forget, there are Stark Industries weapons and the terrorists' loot still scattered through the valley. You might want to inventory those." Coulson flashed a tight, strained smile. "Thanks for the reminder." Then the three agents, Lu Xiaofeng, Meng Bo, and Coulson, waved and, like Iron Man before them, opened a shimmering doorway and stepped through. Coulson had a final look back and saw Tony, still in armor, speaking with a very young boy just beyond the threshold. The door closed, and everything outside the valley returned to normal. Coulson checked his radio. "I have to report back to the director. Send the rest of your forces here and pack up whatever's left in the valley." Chapter 53. Tony's Change. Tony Stark stood again in the tavern. The last time he'd been here, he was still the playboy Tony Stark. Now he had a new name, Iron Man. Of course, the press hadn't quite adopted it yet. Headlines had come out, and Tony had no intention of becoming a superhero overnight. Because of the 8-hour time difference between Afghanistan and the US, the tavern was still open when he stepped through the cross-border gate, though it was nearing closing and only a few people remained. "Welcome back, our playboy Tony Stark." Jiangju greeted him with a smile. Tony, still wearing the heavy steel suit, nodded and pointed at his arm. He hadn't looked yet, but he knew there was a tattoo there now. "Is that some kind of recognition?" "Naturally. That way you can drop in whenever you're in danger and ask for help," Jiangju said cheerfully. Tony rubbed his forehead inside the helmet. "I need some time to absorb this whole breaking news thing." He tapped the comm. "Can I make a call? There are probably a few people expecting me back." "Trust me," Jiangju said with mock malice. "No more than 3 people actually want you to come back." Tony grinned. "I thought it was only 1. He sounded half embarrassed, half amused. "This whole situation is inconvenient. I'll take you up on that drink next time, boss." "I'm looking forward to it," Jiangju replied. He understood all too well that if Tony went back now, he'd be immediately building another generation of metal suits. Tony called Pepper. After a round of the usual roaring service on the phone, he told her to come to New York with Happy to pick him up. He didn't explain how or why he'd suddenly appeared in New York. Pepper didn't ask. At that moment, Lu Xiaofeng and the others returned to the tavern. They waved to Jiangju, took seats to rest, and looked tired. They hadn't faced any impossible battles, but the day had worn them out mentally. After Tony finished the call, he stood and walked over to them. "Thank you for the rescue," he said. "Don't mention it. We came away richer for it," Axing answered with a smile. "I have to say, I'm impressed. In such a desperate situation, you still managed to invent a weapon to save yourself." Tony blinked, a rare humble moment crossing his face. "I've actually been thinking about making a Mark series of armors for a while." He looked at them earnestly. "You saved me, so if there's ever anything you need, just ask." Lu Xiaofeng waved a hand. "No need. S.H.I.E.L.D. commissioned this mission, and they'll handle the follow-up." She added, "If you're trying to avoid owing S.H.I.E.L.D. any favors, you'll have to talk to their director." Tony's smile faltered. He disliked being tied to tangled organizations. S.H.I.E.L.D. was messy, and indebtedness could be worse than owing. He didn't have the power to unilaterally rewrite other people's contracts. "I remember Nick Fury saying one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D. was your father," Axing said, nodding toward Lu Xiaofeng. "Maybe this is destiny." "Destiny, huh?" Tony forced a laugh. "Looks like I'm the one who has to sort this out." He brightened. "I won't keep you. Next time, dinner's on me. Right, I know a place with great barbecue." "Looking forward to it," they replied. Tony left Lu Xiaofeng and the others to rest and moved to the window. The red panda, Xiaohei, who'd been dozing in a corner, blinked awake as Tony's shadow cut across the light. The animal yawned and blinked, then noticed the Mark I suit. "So you were saved," Xiaohei commented lazily. "Wait, are you talking?" Tony turned, searching for a voice beyond the red panda. He had the tavern's little magics on his mind, and suddenly remembered it wasn't the first time he'd seen odd things here. Xiaohei stood and patted over. "You look exhausted. Want me to help you out of that suit?" "It's not that bad. The armor doesn't rely on my strength. It's powered by this," Tony said, thumping the glowing arc reactor on his chest. "It's the thing keeping me alive." "Of course I know that," Xiaohei replied, tail flicking. "But don't you feel hot? I get the impression you didn't consider heat dissipation." Before Tony could argue, the armor peeled itself away, segment by segment, and reassembled politely beside him, folding into a compact, silent shape. Tony exhaled. "Thanks. I am a little tired," he admitted sheepishly. "When I built it, I mostly thought about offense and defense. Comfort didn't make the cut." "No need to thank me," Xiaohai said, sniffing at the Mark I. "You're going back?" "Yeah, I have important things to deal with." Tony's face grew serious as he thought of arrangements to be made. Xiaohai walked around the armor and inspected it. "You're a genius," the panda said. Tony waved the praise away. "There was a lot of talk today. Embarrassing, frankly." "Embarrassing? Xiaohai shook his head, then cocked his head. "S.H.I.E.L.D.'s here, aren't they? You better protect your toys." Tony followed Xiaohai's gaze. A black windbreaker and a swagger caught his eye. Nick Fury, eye patch and all, had just stepped out of a car and was making his way toward the pub. No one's taking my things. I'm done making weapons for sale, Tony said flatly. Nick Fury pushed through the door. He'd heard Coulson's reports and the rumors, but hearing about something and seeing it were different. He stopped short when he saw Tony standing beside the armor. "Mr. Stark, glad you're all right," Fury said, putting on a professional but genuine smile. "Looks like you've made another impressive toy." Tony's tone was sharp. "Yes, it's just a toy." Fury didn't miss the coldness. "There seems to be a misunderstanding between us. Once our business here is settled, we can talk calmly." "There wasn't any need for S.H.I.E.L.D., Tony snapped. "I could have gotten out of that cave on my own." He turned to Xiao Hai and added, more casually, "Can you hold on to this for me? My people seem to have arrived." The panda nodded, already tucking the Mark I away with the quiet efficiency of something that had seen stranger things than human politics. Outside, Tony heard the approaching footsteps of his own. Pepper and Happy had arrived to collect him. He straightened, putting on the half-smile of a man who'd survived and intended to keep doing things his way. Chapter 54, The Great Wheel of History. Tony's brusque exit hardly surprised Nick Fury. To most people, Tony Stark was exactly the sort of man who behaved like that. Fury watched him go, then turned back to Jiang Ju and asked, "How can Tony use that power?" "That's not a power," Jiang Ju said. "It's a qualification to enter the tavern. All the guests here have it, except you." "I'm in the tavern now," Fury protested. "You're here because I let you in." Jiang Ju replied calmly. "They came by the tavern's choice." "So that's why I couldn't get in last time," Fury said, the memory snapping back. He had tried to reach Jiang Ju once before, in a desperate life-or-death moment, and had been turned away. Now it made sense. Jiang Ju hadn't let him in, but the tavern's own rules had decided the others. "There's a difference," Jiang Ju continued. "With that qualification, no matter where you are, you can come here instantly." "How do you get it?" Fury demanded. Jiang Ju shrugged. "I don't know." "Don't know? You're the owner of the tavern," Fury said, incredulous. "Owner, yes," Jiang Ju said, setting his cup on the bar. "But the tavern has its own ways and rules. I usually don't interfere. That would get boring. Besides, is there anything else you need to know?" Fury shook his head, then spent a little time talking with Lu Xiaofeng and the others about the follow-up to their commission. Eventually, he glanced, slightly reluctant, at Mark Was and left without looking back. After he departed, the three clients who had finished their commission said their goodbyes to Jiang Ju and went on their way. Xiao Hai, however, had taken control of Mark I with a kind of puppet charm, using the great suit as a toy and parading it around the tavern like it was a playground. Jiang Ju called after him. "Hey, stop playing with it. Don't damage Mark I." "Relax," Xiao Hai called from atop the helmet. "I'm protecting it with magic. Nothing's going to happen." "Fine," Jiang Ju said. "If you love playing so much, you can use that energy to clean the tavern." He turned and walked up to the second floor. Outside, Tony's departure had not been the end of the drama. Happy and Pepper hurried up to him as he left. Pepper urged him to go to a hospital for a checkup, but Happy had other ideas. He insisted on driving Tony straight to Stark Industries in New York and calling a press conference. In the New York branch's large conference room, reporters filled the seats at the hint of breaking news. They fixed their attention on the man under the podium, bruises still darkening his face, hair ruffled, looking half disheveled. He had, improbably, a cheeseburger in one hand. Tony sat sideways on the podium, chewing slowly while the press watched like hungry wolves. He set the burger down, leaned back, and spoke. "I can't help thinking I should ask my father what it's like to be an arms dealer," he said. "Everyone outside has opinions about us, but I want to hear it from him, personally." His voice had an odd, charged quality. "When I went out this time, I saw young American soldiers maimed by weapons my company made. I saw beautiful American women who were soldiers turned into cold corpses. I saw innocent people dying because we gave others the tools to take life without hesitation." "Mr. Stark, what do you mean?" a reporter shouted. "Are you taking responsibility for this?" Obadiah Stane, sitting nearby, stiffened and looked ready to step in, but Tony cut him off. "I'm not sick," he said coolly. "My head's clear." He rose, met the sea of cameras and microphones, and announced, Starting today, Stark Industries will cancel all weapons research and development. We'll permanently close our weapons production facilities. This order takes effect immediately. Silence hit the room like a physical thing. Reporters blinked. Obadiah opened his mouth to salvage the situation. Questions thundered at Tony as he walked off the podium, but he ignored them. Bodyguards shepherded him out while the press crowded for answers, and Obadiah tried to manage the fallout. On the drive to the airport, Pepper watched him in the rear view. "Do you know what will happen when the reporters spread this?" she asked. "I know," Tony said. "A company built on war loses its biggest earner. Our stock will probably drop, maybe $50 in a day." "You're going to make people think you're crazy," Pepper said. "Do you think I'm crazy?" Tony asked, turning to look at her. She felt the question like a shock. Tony's face, despite its bruises and exhaustion, had an intensity that made her look away. "No," she said, steadying herself. "I think you'll find another way." Tony smiled a little. "Good." He leaned back and, as if spinning plans the way other men doodle, pointed out the window to one of the tall towers dotting the Manhattan skyline. "What do you think about moving the company headquarters into that building? I'll buy it, make a few modifications, put my name on it." Pepper stared. They had been talking about consequences and responsibility, and in the space of a breath, Tony had shifted to urban real estate and new beginnings. She had no idea where he was going, but she could sense that whatever it was, Tony Stark intended to make it big. On the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, when most of the tavern's guests lay asleep, the tattoos on their arms suddenly began to glow. Half dazed, they found themselves drawn to the tavern again. But the place that greeted them this time was no ordinary inn. It had transformed into an elegant, old-style pavilion decked for the festival. The moon hung larger and brighter than usual, and the river around the pavilion glittered in the silver light, lending the scene a peaceful, almost dreamlike warmth. The first to arrive was Zhao Linger. She remembered finishing her studies and drifting off in her bed. Then, in a daze, she had opened her eyes to find herself here. Her clothes had changed. She was wearing the gown she used to wear as a princess. "Linger, what are you standing there for? Come here," a gentle voice called. Startled, Linger looked toward a nearby table and saw a beautiful woman waving at her. "Mother!" she cried, tears springing to her eyes. She ran to her and hugged her tightly. "Heh, my Linger still cries so easily," came a warm chuckle. Linger lifted her head and saw the face she had longed for, Li Xiaoyao, smiling beside her mother. "Oh, my little Linger has grown up," her mother teased, looking at her fondly. "Now that you have brother Xiaoyao, you don't want your mother anymore." "Mother, don't say that," Linger protested, but she held on to her mother all the same and kept her gaze fixed on Xiaoyao, as if afraid that if she looked away, he might disappear. "Don't hug her so tight," her mother scolded playfully, ruffling Linger's hair. "I'm not going anywhere. Don't make Xiaoyao laugh." Linger breathed in the familiar scent of her mother and felt a surge of emotion. She let the tears she had been holding back leak out for a moment, then quickly wiped them away and smiled, not wanting her mother to see her cry. "Happy Mid-Autumn Festival, Linger," Li Xiaoyao said softly. "Oh, today's the Mid-Autumn Festival? I'd forgotten," Linger giggled. With her mother and her beloved brother there beside her, she felt like that carefree little princess again. Chapter 55. Orochimaru's Invitation. The next morning, when Zhang Juyi woke up and turned on the TV, every channel was carrying the same headline. Stark Industries had shut down its weapons research and factories. Whatever Tony had done after returning had clearly shocked the world. "It looks like it's finally begun," Xiaohei said around a strip of emerald green bamboo. "It's a start, even if it's a bit sudden," Zhang Juyi replied with a small smile. "Do you think Obadiah will try to build another Iron Overlord?" Xiaohei asked, curious. "I thought Tony and Dr. Wu destroyed the design." "It could be rebuilt," Zhang Ji said after thinking for a moment. "The real problem is the arc reactor, the power source. If Obadiah knows how Tony escaped, he might still manage it. If that's true, we might still hear someone say, 'I am Iron Man' again." Xiaohei suddenly grew excited. "Keep eating. I'm heading downstairs," Zhang Juyi said without looking up, setting Xiaohei back in his arms and leaving the living room for the tavern on the first floor. Xiaohei watched Zhang Juyi's retreating back for a moment, thinking that the older man seemed lost in memories again. One of those old man lapses where a single word or familiar scene triggers a flood of recollection. He laughed to himself at the thought that Zhang Juyi was getting old, but the old man had already gone downstairs and missed the response. With a quick flick of magic, Xiaohei tidied the living room, gathered the bamboo scraps, and followed. When he entered the tavern, someone was already there early, Orochimaru. He hadn't been around much lately. His skin was even paler than usual, but he looked physically stronger, more robust than before. Two folded cards that looked like invitations lay on the table in front of him. Curiosity got the better of Xiaohei. He hopped over and peered. They were indeed invitations, wedding invitations, addressed to Zhang Juyi and Xiaohei. Who's getting married? Xiaohei hopped onto the table and, after opening one of the cards, looked up in surprise. You and Tsunade? Orochimaru nodded slightly, a small smile touching his mouth. Yes, we're planning to marry next month. That's fast. Xiaohei cocked his head. Why the rush? You've been at it over there for a year already. Surely that's long enough. Zhang Juyi, who had come down the stairs by then, rapped Xiaohei lightly on the head. A year has passed, he said. Mito-sama has begun having some minor health issues, so we'd like to get married as soon as possible. Orochimaru smiled. That's why I'm here, to invite the boss and your senior. Don't leave me home alone this time, okay? Xiaohei pleaded, looking at Zhang Juyi. I want to see what Konoha is like. All right. I didn't take you to Hogwarts, Konoha, with me last time. I've said that a dozen times, Zhang Juyi replied, half amused, half exasperated. Orochimaru watched their little exchange and smiled in a way that suggested he understood. Since confirming his relationship with Tsunade, Orochimaru hadn't changed his nature much, but he seemed less extreme, calmer, and genuinely in love. Boss, one more thing, Orochimaru said, turning to Zhang Juyi. I'd like to invite a few of the tavern's friends to attend. Consider it a commission, if you will. If you can, please inform them. That's fine, Zhang Juyi said, holding Xiaohei and stroking the little creature. But do you think it'll be okay for us to suddenly show up in Konoha? It will be, Orochimaru replied calmly. I've already told the teacher. He's curious about my so-called friends. How are you getting along with the teacher now? Xiaohei asked, squinting comfortably in Zhang Juyi's arms at the mention of the third Hokage. It's not bad, Orochimaru said. When I first saw Boss Zhang Juyi's vision of the future, I misjudged him. But after I broke free of the master-apprentice frame and observed him more objectively, I realized he's a competent politician and Hokage. A politician and Hokage, Zhang Juyi repeated with a sigh. So you still have some resentment toward the third. It's not resentment, exactly, Orochimaru said, smiling wryly. I've seen a different world, new technologies and ideas that can be dangerous to the old ways. I've pushed many changes in Konoha, but he still rejects some of my experiments and ideas. If Mito-sama hadn't supported me, my research institute might have been shut down. Sounds like resentment to me, Xiaohei muttered inwardly. Perhaps I was a bit hasty, Orochimaru conceded. He's been asking questions. He already seems to know what potion I gave Nao Shu. He worries that if Nao Shu becomes the next Hokage, Konoha will become the Senju family's Konoha, not everyone's Konoha. Zhang Juyi grinned. If the first saw that, he'd probably sit in a corner, draw circles while muttering in frustration, and then get scolded severely by the second. Orochimaru pictured the scene and blinked, unsettled by the strange mental image, then dismissed it as one of Zhang Juyi's jokes. Apart from Uzumaki Mito, wife of the first, no one in Konoha these days would imagine the first as anything but a solemn leader. The idea of him playing the fool was absurd. Who do you want me to notify? Zhang Juyi asked, looking at the invitation again. Leader Xiong, Miss Laster, Hercules, and Mr. Gandalf, those who fought with us and deserve invitations, Orochimaru said. And also people like Urahara Kisuke, Dr. Agasa, Little Conan, and Lu Xiaofeng. The list was a mix. Old comrades in arms, followed by fellow scientists and acquaintances who'd brought gifts or who had personal connections to Orochimaru. Zhang Juyi nodded. 8 people. I'll tell them to come to the tavern. You can deliver the invitations personally. Thank you, boss. Orochimaru stood and bowed in a way that was surprisingly earnest. He clearly took the wedding seriously. Zhang Juyi smiled as he pocketed the invitation. Orochimaru may have been strange in many ways, but this was not a joke. Chapter 56, Han Nuo and Chen Jing. After Orochimaru spoke about his marriage, his attention drifted to a suit of armor standing nearby, Mark 1. He seemed especially drawn to the chest. Orochimaru could sense a tremendous energy within it, and his curiosity was obvious. "Do you like Mark 1?" Xiaohei asked, jumping out of Jiangju's arms and coaxing the suit to move like a puppet. "It's Tony's creation. It's only made from leftover materials, but it still looks good." "Is it a puppet?" Orochimaru asked, intrigued. "No, it's armor. One person wears it to fight. All of its power comes from the arc reactor in the chest." Xiaohei used a spell to pry Mark 1 open, showing that the mechanism stayed intact even when fully revealed. "It's basically a crude prototype. Jiangju should show him the rest of the Mark series." Jiangju grinned, and unable to resist teasing, let Orochimaru experience an illusionary recap, Mark 1's development history, and a few of Tony's combat clips. Orochimaru watched quietly, then nodded. "Interesting. It's somewhat like the puppetry techniques from Sunagakure, but different." "It's completely different," Xiaohei said. "Puppets need a ninja to operate them. These suits just need one person and a smart computer. And like I said, this is only the rough version. If our world had armor like that, allowing ordinary people to stand against shinobi, it could change everything," Orochimaru mused with a smile. "Although I imagine it would be attacked by a coalition, like Konoha was after the first's death." "That's what I thought," Jiangju snapped. "Even my teacher, the Sandaime, would object." Orochimaru laughed. "Boss, forgive me. I have some inspiration I must follow up on. I need to return to my lab. Let me know if anything comes up." He left abruptly, so fast and secretive that Jiangju almost reached out to probe his mind. He stopped himself. Once you begin breaking the rules you set for yourself, there's no end to which rules you'll break. "What kind of inspiration do you think he got from seeing Mark 1? Jiangju asked Xiaohei. "A mechanical tailed beast? Tailed beast armor? Kamen Rider?" Xiaohei threw out wild guesses. "The first two are possible, but what's with the last one?" Jiangju looked at him in disbelief as Xiaohei rambled. Of course, he had to be ridiculous at the end. The boundary door opened then. Tony, having changed clothes, stepped out with a smile. He looked rested, just a little better than the last time they'd seen him. "Boss, Mr. Red Panda, I'm here to collect Mark 1, Tony said immediately. "Can't you rest a few more days?" Xiaohai pouted, staring at Mark 1 with obvious reluctance. Tony didn't quite know how to respond. He didn't really need to take the suit back. This was a pivotal piece in history, and he wanted it, but he could have left it. He didn't care about the reactor in the chest. For him, these were creations, and he loved them for what they meant. "Stop making trouble, Xiaohei. Mark 1 has special meaning to him," Jiangju scolded lightly, nudging Xiaohei. "If you like the suit, Mr. Red Panda, I can build a new one for you," Tony said magnanimously. To him, this was a matter of money, not sentiment. "All right, I'll take it back myself, so you don't have to move it piece by piece." Xiaohei hopped onto Mark 1's shoulder as if to claim it. "Thank you so much, Mr. Red Panda," he added sweetly. Tony's mission here was clearly just to retrieve Mark 1. Although more customers had come through the tavern that day, his mind was already on creating a new series of Mark armors. He said a hurried goodbye to Jiangju and left the tavern with Xiaohei. Once Tony was gone, Jiangju returned to serving guests and brought out a new mixed drink, a rainbow-hued cocktail with 5 layers of color flowing gently in the glass. "Hey, this one's special, boss," a handsome man with dark, twisted horns said, inhaling the tavern's aroma. "It's as if it's a blend of human emotions and desires." "This glass comes from a different world," Jiangju explained, smiling. "There, a mysterious place called Pawn Shop Number 8 exists. People can pawn anything, possessions, emotions, even souls. This drink was originally invented by the pawn shop owner, Han Nuo. My version, though, is enhanced. Like the guest says, I've captured the 7 emotions and 6 desires of humans and adjusted it so non-human customers can experience them too." In a corner sat 2 newcomers, a man in a black Tang-style robe and a woman in a black cheongsam embroidered with gold. They had arrived earlier, intending to explore the tavern, but instead found themselves under the host's attentive gaze. Boss, he seems to be looking at us, the woman whispered nervously. It's fine, the man replied. If he knows our origins, it means he's more powerful than both us and the shadow behind us. His voice held an odd flicker of hope, an almost desperate wish to be able to die for once. Jiangju approached with 2 glasses of the pawnshop number 8 drink, placed them on the table, and sat down opposite them. The woman immediately stood, startled by his boldness. The man remained seated, composed. I didn't expect Boss Han and Miss Chen to come to my tavern, Jiangju said, nodding to the pair. Am I that intimidating? Sit, Miss Chen. Ah Jing, the man Han said gently to the woman. Boss Jiang asked you to sit, so sit. Yes, boss, Chen Jing replied, and taking Han's cue, eased back into her seat. Boss Jiang invited us here? Do you have business with us? Han asked calmly. It wasn't an invitation, Jiangju said. The tavern chooses its guests. And don't worry, the mysterious black shadow following you can't reach this place. Not just anyone can enter here. Simple words, but spoken with absolute confidence and an unmistakable hint of contempt for the shadow they had feared. The two of them felt it. Jiangju's certainty and the tavern's quiet power. Chapter 57. Demons and Angels. Boss Han was in fact Han Nuo, the man who ran pawnshop number 8, the place Jiangju had just mentioned. He had once been a businessman in the Republic era, sharp, prosperous, with land and a happy married life. Everything changed after his son was claimed by a dark presence that ran the mysterious pawnshop number 8. The Shadow's demands brought ruin to Han Nuo's life. In the end, to protect his wife and child, he agreed to the Shadow's terms. He would become the pawnshop's owner, hand his son over, and keep the bargain secret from his wife. He pawned the thing he loved most and turned himself into a loveless custodian of pawnshop number 8. Even without love, Han Nuo kept his household together and watched over his wife. But he suspected the items pawned in that shop never ended well. The shadow that ran it was too powerful. Even angels and the heavens could only check it, never destroy it. So Han Nuo gave up fighting. He submitted and helped the shadow run the shop, burying whatever remained of his own heart. Chen Jing's presence beside him was an accident. She'd stumbled into the pawn shop by fate, and without getting into the details now, had survived where she otherwise might have perished. One night, Han Nuo and Chen Jing had been attempting a teleportation to do some covert work at a client's house. The technique misfired, and they wound up in a strange tavern instead, a place populated by non-human faces. The power of pawnshop number 8 had been weakened for a time, and they planned to observe quietly. They didn't expect the tavern owner to have noticed them already and to approach them personally. I'd never have imagined a place like this existed, Han Nuo admitted inwardly, hope flickering, though he didn't dare to trust it. The world's full of wonders, Jiangju said with a smile, as if to prove the point. You don't have to live where pawnbrokers and shadows rule. Here, you can keep your distance and enjoy some rare peace. He nodded at a small bottle on the counter, labeled Pawnshop Na 8. I made this using your old recipe and added a few special touches. Try it. Han Nuo lifted the glass and inhaled. The scent brought him back decades in an instant, to the house he had once shared with his wife. He hadn't let himself think of her in years. The aroma opened everything at once. Laughter, arguments, small domestic scenes, the feel of a shared life. He tasted the wine, and before he knew it, had drunk the whole glass. He closed his eyes and let memories wash over him. In those few minutes, the truth settled on him like a weight. The person who had lived beside him for decades was the figure at the center of all those images. He had loved, but by pawning that love away to the shadow, he had buried the recognition of it. Chen Jing took a sip as well, but it meant something different to her. Her past was hard, a lowly background, a fate that might have ended in a brothel if not for the pawn shop. The intelligence and small comforts she had now came from things pawned by others and traded for. The wine tasted good, but nothing in it unearthed buried memories for her. Ah Jing, it's time to go. Han Nuo handed Jiangju the money for the drink, stood, and prepared to leave. The wine had given him a brief, vivid taste of emotion, but now its effect faded and the old caution returned. He would not throw himself into danger. If one day you decide you want to truly cut the shadow out of your life, tell me, Jiangju added casually, and you're welcome to come back anytime. The tavern's door is always open. Hannuo hesitated only a moment, then nodded and left with Chen Jing. He still hated the shadow that had taken so much from him, but he knew nobody did anything for nothing in this world. Today's visit had to be weighed against countless possibilities. Whether it was a trap, he could not tell. So he left cautiously. From across the room, the demon who had been watching Hannuo's departure muttered, "There was something familiar about that man." He glanced after Hannuo with curiosity and distaste. "But I hate him all the same. He's really an agent of the dark." Across from him sat a man in white with a faint halo, an angel. "You are a demon. Of course you'd hate pure, dark energy," the angel said with a faint smile. The demon shrugged, but there was a self-conscious edge to him. If their superiors knew the two of them were sitting here drinking together instead of tearing each other apart, they'd be furious. "I heard Constantine caused you trouble again?" the angel asked. He had only heard the name before, a famous exorcist, and wanted to hear more. "You don't want to meet that bastard," the demon said, slamming his glass down. "He stole my true name and forced me into a fight with someone from the fire realm. I nearly died. If I hadn't just come into this tavern and gotten a new hit of strength, I might have been finished." "You're a devil and he's an exorcist," the angel said, half amused. "Shh, don't act pleased." The demon spat the words. "Constantine's famous, all right, and a rotten one. He tricks demons, and he tricks angels too. If you ever meet him, keep your distance." "It's my orders to follow him and record what he does," the angel said lightly. He barely believed the demon's complaint. After all, without this tavern, they wouldn't be sitting here drinking together instead of fighting. "We'll see," the demon said, chuckling darkly. "You'll regret it." "I'm looking forward to it," the angel said earnestly. Fresh from heaven with faith still bright, he really did want to see the world and meet the man who caused so much trouble. "You'll see what this brat's like then," the demon sneered and drained his glass. Zhang Ju turned his head and watched the pair. He didn't much care whether angels and demons bickered or made peace, but he had heard that familiar name, Constantine, before. Constantine was a name that carried weight in many worlds. The tavern attracting patrons who spoke of him was a good sign. If the place could draw beings from that world, other meetings might follow. In his mind, he imagined grand clashes, archangels against ancient exorcists and demonic councils. The image pleased him. He let a faint, knowing smile cross his face, small but unsettling. The two celestial patrons quieted immediately at that smile. Whatever it meant, no one felt like speaking loudly after seeing it. Chapter 58. The Flash is in trouble again. When Barry returned from the tavern, the first thing he did was tell everyone about the doctor. He discovered, to his growing alarm, that the team had already realized there was something fundamentally wrong with Harrison Wells. They didn't know what to do about him. "He's not Wells," Stein said bluntly. "He's Albert Swan." Even without his connection to the Speed Force, Albert Swan was still a man from the future. Letting him roam free risked repeating the whole disaster. Killing him crossed Barry's mind, a thought he hated even to entertain. But as both a cop and a hero, he couldn't lightly take another person's life. "We can only send him out of this world," Stein said finally. "He doesn't belong here." "But," Stein hesitated, "if we do that, your father won't be able to clear his name." Barry's stomach tightened. The possibility had been the last thing he wanted to hear. "Wait," Barry said, remembering the gift Zhang Ju had given him. He took it out and showed it to the team. It wasn't just Reverse Flash's voice, it was a confession. The message admitted to the murders, described the scene in chilling detail, and finished with a strange, almost penitent clause. In order to atone, the speaker left all his inheritance to Barry Allen. "Where did you get this?" Joe asked, eyes fixed on the recording. "Where we talked to Albert Swan," Barry admitted, but he didn't want to focus on the source. "Do you think this can be used as evidence?" "Copy it and give it to me," Joe said. "I'll look into it right away." They all agreed. The priority was figuring out how to get Albert Swan away from their world, but they didn't have a plan. Barry went upstairs to the containment wing alone and opened the single cell where Albert was kept. The man who had once been arrogant and precise sat now small and bald and oddly listless. Losing the Speed Force had stripped him of purpose. We're going to send you back, Barry said, fighting down the hate that still burned inside him. He kept his voice even. Albert didn't bother to look up. He hadn't wanted to go back if it would be like this, defeated, robbed of everything he had schemed for. He let out a short, humorless laugh and turned to regard Barry. "Send me back?" Albert said. "Do you think sending me back will stop me? Do you think I was born with the Speed Force? Send me back and I'll just start over. You'll never be rid of me, Flash." "You want to change history because you couldn't beat me any other way," Barry replied coldly. "Kill me," Albert rasped. "Kill me, Barry. There's no point in sending me off. If you kill me, everything ends." "I won't kill anyone," Barry said, and the conviction in his voice pained him more than the apology. "Even if you murdered my mother, I won't become a murderer because of you." Albert sneered. "The Flash can't kill. Should I be glad that my lifelong enemy won't end me? That the man I've wanted dead for years has mercy?" "Before you change your mind, tell me how to send you back," Barry said, not giving Albert the satisfaction of getting under his skin. Albert preferred taunts. He babbled, tried to provoke Barry. Barry kept his calm and left, shaking his head. Over the next weeks, he went to the cell almost every day. Albert refused to cooperate until one day when Barry came with his father Joe. Perhaps it was the sight of Joe, perhaps something else. Albert suddenly scrawled an equation on the cell wall, a set of calculations and a method, crude but workable. They made a miniature temporal device according to Albert's notes, then used Barry's speed to open a small time rift. No one expected what came through. A second reverse flash, more powerful, far more vicious than the one they'd been dealing with, exploded out of the rift. The fight was brutal. The newcomer shattered Barry's leg and nearly killed Joe. In the chaos, Joe, desperate and furious, put a shot into Albert Swan's chest. Albert fell. The new reverse flash was annihilated almost as quickly by a backlash from the unstable temporal field. The time travel mechanics fought back. For a moment, everyone thought the nightmare was over. Albert was dead, the intruder gone. But the rift didn't close. Instead, it kept widening, a growing temporal tear that threatened to swallow Central City. It took everything Barry and Firestorm had to collapse that rift. They slammed into it with every ounce of speed and power and finally closed the breach, but there was a cost. Shutting it down threw open dozens of smaller doors between worlds. Other speedsters and their twisted allies spilled through, hungry for the Speed Force. Criminals arrived with their minds warped and enhanced, sent by enemies from another Earth to siphon off Barry's velocity and kill him. The city was saved, in the eyes of its citizens, by the Flash. What they didn't know was that the crisis had been born from the same desperate act that was supposed to send one man home. And they couldn't know that the gates would keep opening, that more threats would come, that Barry's own decisions had consequences rippling across realities. "So you brought your father here to let him live in this world, at least for now?" Jiangju asked later, calm as ever. "Yeah," Barry said. "It might be excessive to ask, but I don't know what else to do. The Speed Force, it's too much a part of this. I need people who know other kinds of rules, people like you." Jiangju sighed. "Fine, we're friends, but you'll need Guyi's approval. She's the guardian of this world, and you'll need money. I hope you understand." Barry let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Guyi's approval didn't scare him. He had met the guardian and trusted she wouldn't refuse help to someone like his father. As for money, Barry had access now to the inheritance Albert had left. Awkward, given who it came from, but it would handle the expenses. He only worried about one thing, whether Jiangju would say yes. Their last encounter had ended in a misunderstanding. Barry had been impulsive and had misread Jiangju's kindness. He hoped she hadn't held that against him. "Thanks," Barry said simply, grateful and a little ashamed in the same breath. He had saved the city, lost and gained much in the process, and the future felt like a tangle of doors waiting to be stepped through. Chapter 59th, Stubborn People. When Barry made his request, Jiangju could only manage a wry smile. Taking someone in here was easy enough. So long as Guyi had no objections, he didn't mind. But this world wasn't ordinary. If something happened to Barry's father here, it would be complicated. "It looks like I should give this to your father after all." Jiangju produced a thin card and handed it to Barry. I copied it from that reverse lightning. It's a Speed Force card. If your father carries this, he'll be much safer here. Is this world dangerous? Barry asked, bewildered. He'd only been gone a short time and hadn't noticed anything amiss. The world has slipped into a dangerous period, Jiangju said, shrugging. I can't be watching your dad 24/7. No, that's not what I meant. Barry waved him off. He hadn't been thinking that far. You could always send him to a safer world. That's an option, Jiangju agreed. But if you want him here, that's fine too. Unless something happens, he should be okay with the card. Barry's expression softened. How much are the card and the reader, by the way? I'll bring them for him next time. He smiled. Jiangju raised an eyebrow. You really are the heir to all of Dr. Harrison's assets, huh, rich man? Barry's smile faded. I don't want those things. Turning his gaze away, he said quietly, money came at too high a price, my mother's life and a miserable childhood. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean. Jiangju stopped, flushing a little. He hadn't intended to be insensitive. Barry waved it off. I get it. Now that business is done, Barry said, give me whatever you'd recommend. When I came in, some people praised a glass called Pawn Shop Number 8. That one isn't right for you, Jiangju replied. For someone like Barry, whose life had been so marked by loss, Pawn Shop Number 8 would only stir darker things. He thought for a moment and then brightened. Wait, there's one I learned from some flower elves. They're always tinkering and making odd, delightful things. This is a special drink they use to cheer guests up. It's called the Taste of Happiness. He set a pale pink glass in front of Barry with a smile. Try it. Barry looked at the drink and then at Jiangju. Some people say I'll never be happy, that my life is only betrayal, death, and separation. That's not necessarily true, Jiangju said. Those people don't know you have friends. What other people say about your future doesn't decide it. Thank you. Barry returned the smile and raised his glass. To friendship, he drank. A small, genuine smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Whether from Jiangju's words or the wine, no one could tell. Jiangju stood and left Barry to his thoughts. He tapped the communication tattoo on Gu Yi's hand to let him know everything was sorted, then went to introduce the tavern's services to a new guest who was staring at him like a coiled spring. Unfortunately, the man didn't trust easily at all. No matter what Jiangju said, he remained guarded, fingers twitching toward the golden belt at his waist. Say something I can believe, the man demanded, suspicious. This is a tavern that opens doors to other worlds. Jiangju said, exasperated. Believe it or not, the door's that way. If you don't like me, you can leave. Instead of leaving, the man drew an injector from his belt and jabbed it into his shoulder. What kind of hallucinogen did you slip into my drink? He snarled. Then he hurled a few projectile darts at Jiangju. The darts weren't ordinary. They were bat-shaped. Jiangju casually plucked one from the air and made it vanish with a snap of his fingers. He was more than a little tired of the performance. The man was, unmistakably, the Dark Knight. They'd explained the place to the tavern's other guests. The proof was there. Yet Batman didn't believe any of it. Did you see where he went? Xiao Hai hurried over, peering around. He was right here a moment ago. What can we do? Jiangju sighed. This guy's suspicious of everything. Even if he believes in the tavern, he'll be watching us. He'll make plans. Xiao Hai suggested, why not revoke his right to cross the boundary for a while? Everyone who comes here is a guest, Jiangju said, puzzled. And he's Batman. I told you before I'd avoid interfering with the selection process. We can't start barring people because they're uncomfortable. As they were speaking, the boundary door opened again. A man in a black suit, his face handsome but cool, stepped through. He scanned the room and, spotting Barry, who was still a little tipsy, walked over and sat across from him. Here we go again, Jiangju muttered. Dressed as he now was, this was Bruce Wayne, the public persona Batman had just shed. Wayne unbuttoned his waistcoat and gave the room a dismissive glance. Waiter, a glass of iced water, he called, as if the odd clientele didn't exist. Jiangju materialized in front of him. Bruce Wayne, Mr. Batman, if you don't believe this place exists, why come back? I don't know what you're talking about, Bruce replied evenly. I'm not Batman. You're not trying to convince me. Jiangju arched a brow. When you arrived earlier, you knew this tavern can open a door anywhere. You didn't bother changing clothes. You went back to the same spot and came in deliberately. Bruce's composure flickered. His face tightened. He opened his mouth to deny it, then hesitated. Even though Jiangju respected Batman, admitted admiration, in fact, confronting someone like Bruce Wayne in public made him sure almost nobody could stand up to him the way he did. But he'd called him out, and now they both stood in the quiet that followed, waiting to see which stubborn person would blink first. Chapter 60, Taverns and Customers. Xiaohei watched Jiangju's expression and burst out laughing. Batman, Bruce Wayne, stood there, looking like he was weighing whether to disclose his identity. Jiangju didn't want to argue about the tavern's legitimacy with him, so with a snapping gesture, he politely but firmly sent the man away. "It's the first time I've seen the boss like this," a fox demon said with a grin. "Maybe he's a special kind of person. If you pay attention, you'll see Boss Jiang treats everyone differently. Sometimes gentle, sometimes haughty, sometimes friendly, sometimes indifferent." A snake demon across from them, who hadn't detected the others as monsters at all, raised an eyebrow. "Watch it, you two. Don't go gossiping about me," Jiangju snapped. "One more word and I'll show you your true forms and sell you to the zoo." "Boss, do you really have such a cruel heart?" the fox demon said, feigning injury. All right, go play." Jiangju relented. He was more bothered by Batman's visit than by the demon's chatter. Batman belonged to justice, no matter what one thought of American justice. An extreme hero, but a hero nonetheless. Jiangju couldn't just dismiss him. He didn't consider himself an evil god. Those who were controlled by power weren't gods at all, merely slaves to it. "A Batman is giving you a headache?" Xiaohei teased. "If he were a villain, it'd be easy. Kill him or seal him. But he's done a lot for his city. Gotham needs him," Jiangju said with a shrug. "So you'll just let him keep causing trouble?" Xiaohei protested. "Not at all," Jiangju answered. "I just haven't figured out a better solution yet." He headed back to his seat and asked, "Which world do you think this Batman is from?" "How would I know?" Xiaohei yawned. "He looks like an actor. Every actor has something about them." "I heard that," Jiangju replied lightly. "You always want to charge in when you see him." Xiaohei curled up on his cat and went to sleep. "Let it be for now. Rest up. If I think of something, I'll make a plan." Jiangju gave up for the moment and walked to the door, where Gu Yi was already waiting. He still worried about Barry's situation. He liked Barry Allen, the Flash, but his old obsession had faded. Last time had used up a lot of fate. Now he helped because Barry was a guest of the tavern and everything here was a service to be charged for. "Boss Jiang, long time no see," Gu Yi greeted with a smile. "Yes, what have you been busy with?" Jiangju poured a glass of wine for her. Gu Yi explained evenly. "The dark field has been very active. It isn't just camartage with mages anymore. Some magic users are being consumed by power. We have to handle those cases." "It's better to be busy," Jiangju said. "I can't stand idleness. My life is motion." "You can see that from this tavern," Gu Yi agreed, raising the glass and drinking gracefully. Jiangju told her why he'd called her over. "Barry's back. This time he wants our help taking care of his father." "Taking care of him? You mean keeping him here temporarily?" Gu Yi asked. "You should ask Barry," Jiangju said. "His father will be living here temporarily. Once Barry's affairs in his world are sorted, he'll come back to take him home, and it's a paid commission. Ask for a fee or some favor." "He paid a price last time," Gu Yi murmured, thoughtful. "People always have to pay for impulsiveness and recklessness." Jiangju smiled. "Exactly. I'm holding him to that principle." Gu Yi clinked her cup against his and finished the wine. "I'll wake him for you," she said. Jiangju took a cool sip of wine. The chills slid down his throat, and he almost sighed with pleasure. He noticed he kept snapping his fingers when casting spells, an unconscious tic, and wondered, briefly and oddly, what Thanos would think of it. He shook the thought away and let himself drift among the patrons, listening in on their conversations. That was one of his favorite parts of the job, watching people from different worlds gather because of his tavern, shouting about their problems, exchanging knowledge, studying magic together. The place was an invisible boon, especially for geniuses or eccentric souls trapped at their own world limits and unable to show their worth. The tavern was a stage for them. At a nearby table, Rustic, always fortunate in love, was leaning in to whisper with a pale girl from the Eastern world. Rustic's luck was uncanny. Whenever she came, the person she fancied either didn't show up or appeared alone. Whether coincidence or Rustic's own skill at seduction, few in the tavern noticed this invisible pickup artist, except the regulars. Across the room, the Flying Smoke Emperor and a small, endearingly morbid monarch, who had no interest in riches, argued about world conquest. One complained that he'd never met a worthy rival and had instead allied with nearby human empires to found a nation. The other warned that the other world was terrifying. Survival there meant being constantly on guard. People wanted you dead at every turn. If you weren't careful, you'd be hacked to pieces by humans. Jiangju listened, half amused, half thoughtful. For all the chaos and danger the tavern attracted, it also created a place where strangers could meet, clash, learn, and sometimes in time, go home a little wiser. Chapter 61, The Tragic Life of Barry Allen. The deal between Barry and Gu Yi had been signed in the presence of Jiangju. When Barry brought his father, Henry Allen, into the tavern, the older man, accustomed to seeing strange things, was nonetheless taken aback by the scene before him. It was like seeing the world from a new angle. "I thought I'd adapted to your world," Henry said with a wry smile, "but I guess I still need more time." "I'm sorry, Dad," Barry replied, ashamed. "Trust me, once we catch the speedster, I'll come back and take you home." "I know you will, Barry, and sometimes you have to learn to believe in yourself," Henry said gently. "Not blind faith. After all, you have many good friends. I believe you can beat the bad guys." He looked at his son and smiled. Barry's eyes were wet, but he refused to cry in front of his father. He only said a quiet, "Take care," nodded to Jiangju, and vanished in a streak of lightning. With his father placed somewhere he judged safe, Barry and his team returned to the more immediate problem. The evil speedster, who had been hiding close by, pretending to be a friend, Hunter Zolomon, better known as Zoom. Henry watched his son go and breathed a shaky sigh of relief. Henry's life had already been ruined once. Because of the reverse lightning incident, he'd been imprisoned for over a decade. The police had believed he'd killed his wife. He'd only recently been exonerated and released when he reunited with Barry. Seeing anyone move at Barry's speed was unnerving, and as a parent, all he felt was helplessness. He knew none of this was Barry's fault. Barry was the moral center of the Justice League and an incredibly powerful speedster. The Speed Force itself was linked to him. Villains who wanted to take the Flash down couldn't challenge him directly. They had to exploit his weaknesses, his conscience, his loved ones. One such enemy, a fanatic with nothing left to lose, finally crossed the line. He tried to be the bad guy to the Flash's good, and when that failed, he used the one thing a normal person wouldn't: time travel. He went back and murdered Barry's mother. Once the Reverse Flash discovered that Barry was the Flash, he altered Barry's life in the cruelest way, attacking what Barry cared about most. If Barry hadn't made sure his father was away this time, a lurking speedster might have killed Henry too. Barry has faced versions of himself, time remnants, and in another timeline, one of those remnants went to kill a female counterpart. In the confusion, the man who died was Harrison Wells from an alternate world. Looking at Barry's life in overview, it reads like a series of losses: a mother taken in childhood, loves and friendships torn apart as an adult, a father endangered, a mentor and friend lost to save someone else. Time loops, lost daughters returning briefly from the future, repeated goodbyes, over and over. Jiangju, who had first watched the TV show The Flash as a fan, had admired the story for years. A bright, handsome young man who kept his humanity despite everything trying to crush him. That resilience is what drew Jiangju to the Flash, and why he felt a pang when Barry's impulsiveness cost him friendships. "You must be the boss Jiang Barry talks about," Henry said, moving over to him. "Thank you for helping my son and me." "You're welcome," Jiangju said lightly. "We can be friends. Where will you stay, Mr. Allen?" "I don't really know this place yet. I think I'll live in New York City for now. Seems a little like home," Henry replied, smiling. "We'll see each other here when we can. Consider us acquaintances," Jiangju said. "I'll help as much as I can." "I'll stay a while. Thank you, Boss Jiang." Henry returned the smile. Before he left, Jiangju produced a small card reader and a gold inlaid card. The card's background was dark red with a lightning motif on one side. The other side bore a few lines of English text, an introduction. But the device was clever. The text adjusted to the reader's language. Chinese readers would see Chinese, Japanese would see Japanese, English would see English. Anyone literate could read it. Speed Force? Henry asked, curious. Is this part of Barry's power? Yes, Jiangju said. This world isn't safe. Barry was worried about you, so he bought you this card and reader. If you're in danger, you can use your mind to activate them and tap into a limited Speed Force ability to escape or defend yourself. That's remarkable, Henry breathed. There are even more features? Indeed. This card is both a tool and an identity key, Jiangju explained. When you use it, you can assume the identity of the Flash for protection. It stores uniform data from many parallel worlds. When you activate it the first time, you can pick the suit you prefer, or let it choose randomly. Henry laughed softly. This is amazing. I'll need to study it. I've been away from the normal world so long. I have a lot to relearn. Jiangju's tone grew serious. You've been through an injustice, and in the old world, people might have judged you without knowing the truth. Here, you have a fresh start. Based on the identity the card provides, you won't have that criminal record. That's a kindness I appreciate, Henry said. Barry bought a house here and asked me to stay there for now. I think I'll go and rest. Traveling between worlds is harder than it sounds. He gathered his few belongings, thanked Jiangju again, and left the tavern to merge with the bustling crowd of New York City. Jiangju watched him go, then looked up toward the ceiling, as if tracking a sound only he could hear. He's gone, he murmured. Your speed's getting faster, Barry. There aren't many people here who can even see you now. Chapter 63. What is reality? I am Iron Man, Tony said, grinning as he sipped his drink. Ha, so you can talk. Jiangju gave him a lazy smile as he stabbed another forkful of fiery red rice noodles. My personality doesn't let me hide who I am. Frankly, it's better to announce it loudly than to keep it secret. Tony glanced at the noodles in front of him and winced. Haven't you ever worried that announcing yourself will attract attention? Bad attention? Villain groups, agencies, people who'd want to use you. Jiangju kept eating with a contented crunch. How do you eat something that spicy? Tony asked, incredulous. Like this. Jiangju shrugged around a mouthful of noodles, oil glinting at the corner of his mouth. It's a flower grower's delicacy. If I had to eat burgers every day, I'd rather die. Well, I guess I can't actually die, but still. Tony peered at the plate and shuddered. There are worse burgers, he protested weakly. Sure, whatever. Jiangju wiped his mouth with satisfaction. After meeting you, I don't think I can believe in any god anymore. He regarded Tony as if making a valuable observation. Tony glanced around the little tavern, its regulars, the low chatter, and thought about the faces of wizards and Jedi he'd heard about in other people's tales. So you think Dumbledore and Master Yoda are real too? He said. Or am I actually Robert Downey Jr., an actor, and this is all just a movie set? Jiangju's expression turned absolutely serious. Yep, your real name is Robert Downey Jr., you're an actor, and this is a movie series. He delivered it deadpan. For a moment, Tony laughed. Then his voice lowered into incredulous amusement. Suddenly, Jiangju spat his drink across the table. He moved his head quick enough to avoid hitting Tony, who just shrugged as if he'd been doused with holy water. Jiangju doubled over laughing, clutching his stomach, and then, with absurd composure, kept eating. You actually believed that? Jiangju gasped between laughs, sprawling across the table. A little, Tony admitted. I mean, it's not impossible, especially coming from you. He shrugged. Whether he really believed it or was just playing along, it was hard to tell. Honestly, you don't need to be paranoid about this stuff. Jiangju leveled a look at the room. The world, our world, and others, is made up of countless self-contained worlds that are nevertheless closely connected. Because they're separate, people don't usually cross over. Because they're connected, histories and stories from one world can bleed into another in strange ways. When that happens, some lucky person receives them as inspiration. Those inspirations turn into novels, comics, movies, scripts. He looked at Tony, then at the patrons scattered around the tavern. I'm telling you this not only because of him. You need to know. There are a lot of smart people who come through here. If you think you might be a character from a comic, an animation, a novel, or a game world, it can change you. People react very differently to that knowledge. Some accept it and live on. Some go dark and choose to become harmful. Some break entirely and kill themselves. The human mind is fragile. When your sense of identity gets unmoored, you can collapse, or you can turn toward chaos. That's why anyone who comes to grips with this has to find something that feels reasonable to hang on to. Self-preservation is a powerful thing. The tavern fell quiet. For a moment it felt as if Jiang Ju had cast a time freeze. Then the murmurs returned, some faces thoughtful, some dismissive, some staring off as if outside their own skin. A handful of regulars, quick-witted and suspicious by nature, already knew or had suspected. Others had their worldviews rattled. "This is a bit much. My brain's about to crash," Tony said, half laughing. "I didn't have to say any of this," Jiang Ju went on. "But with your kind of mind, I figured you'd already worked it out. Smart people like to dig for trouble, so I thought it better to be blunt." He shrugged. But the really smart ones had already guessed. They know how to ask about other worlds, why it's pointless to shout that sort of truth unless you mean to help someone. "So why didn't you tell them before?" Tony asked. Jiang Ju sat up straight, dead serious. "Because," he said, and paused for dramatic effect, "I forgot." Tony nearly choked. The energy of annoyance that always lived just under his polished surface surged up like Roddy's electric temper. "You what?" he barked. "You forgot? You're actually telling me you forgot to say something that important?" "I'm not joking," Jiang Ju said, perfectly earnest. "I've told a lot of people in the past that some of you may have come from other worlds, novels, animations, games, but I forgot to say that single sentence out loud just now." Tony snorted. "At least you became a god and opened a tavern instead of trying to run an entire universe," he said, still scolding. "Could have been worse." "When I was younger and reckless, I studied a lot of scriptures," Jiang Ju admitted. "I created some worlds back then. They caused me headaches, sure, but I was their father god. They still love me for it, even with all the confusion I caused." "They have to love you," Tony replied, exasperation giving way to a dry smile. "You're channeling Roddy today," Jiang Ju said, fixing Tony with a deadpan stare. "You complain about everything I say." "And you still haven't answered the question I asked at the start," Tony shot back. "What question?" Jiang Ju asked, eyebrow raised. Tony jabbed a finger toward the crooked little building they were sitting in, a place that had a way of looking slightly off-kilter, as if the world around it had been nudged. "About being on the wrong side of the building. That's not my fault. You were the one who bent the place in the first place, so don't blame me." Jiang Ju rolled his eyes and went back to his noodles, and the tavern's low, uneasy comfort settled around them again, half reality, half story, and all of it somehow oddly normal.